Now, so the goal of these reconcentration camps was to keep them, Cubans, alive and protected until the rebels were defeated. Was to keep them, protected. But it really didn't do it. Over 300,000 people die of diseases and malnutrition in these camps, which further enrages the Cubans at the Spanish. So, if we look on here, look at the picture, there's a cartoon of this time. How does America see themselves in this?
It's helping the women.
Cuba is right here portrayed as a woman on her knees, helpless, needs help. America is the big, strong hero with bad pants and tights.
They
and
have
really big shoes for some reason.
like sombrero.
Yeah, almost kind of. It's more kind of like a European textile with a big feather on it. Oh, this guy, the sombrero, yeah. He almost looks Mexican, which is kind of funny because he's not. He's Spanish. But that's probably because Americans knew more about Mexicans than they did about Spaniards. Still happens today. Quick example, it's on the video. Like Ricky Rubio plays for the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yeah.
There's this group of guys who wear sombreros and stuff when he's playing. And they ask Ricky Rubio about them, and he says, "I'm from Spain. I'm not Mexican." So, let's move on to our next part. Well, actually, no, I'm wrong. We're going to move back. All right, so lastly, now America's role in this is going to a next shift. So America's role, and we see in this picture, this is a comic from, something showing how America was going to be the helpers for Cuba. They were going to save them. But America's got, it's not just that they want to come in and just help Cuba to help Cuba. At the same time, America's got millions of dollars invested in Cuba. There's businesses. Sugar's a big one for sure. But America has millions of dollars invested in Cuba. And the U.S. is trading a lot of goods with Cuba at this time. So the United States is definitely also, especially the businesses, are looking for protecting their interest. And now we got the New York Journal, the New York World. We'll talk about William Randolph Hearst a little bit. He's the one who was the head of the New York Journal. William Randolph Hearst plays a huge role in this war starting. William Randolph Hearst says, you know what? Basically doesn't say stink you bit. He wants to sell more papers. And what sells more papers than a war? Pretty sinister thought. Want to sell papers so you want a war to start, people to die so you can make more money. This is William Randolph Hearst right here. Now, Hearst plays a huge role in involvement with Cuba during the Spanish-American War. He sees this as a huge opportunity to boost his newspaper sales. So, William Randolph Hearst, there's already bad things going on. You can just print the truth. But he prints exaggerated stories about this, saying how horrible the Spanish are being, especially towards women and children. Do women and children from Spain die at this time? Yes. William Randolph Hearst actually exaggerates these stories, makes them bigger than they are, because he wants to sell his newspapers, the New York Journal. So you find huge stories in the New York Journal this time period. They're online. You can actually find the headlines of them all the time saying how bad the Spanish are being towards the Cubans. There's a really good example of it. And the New York World at the same time also had the same thing with Pulitzer. Now, from Cuba, Hearst had reporters, highly paid, well-trained reporters in Cuba. One of them, by the name of Frederick Remington, you can look him up, Google him, see what comes up. Frederick Remington was one of the highest paid reporters in Cuba at this time. Now, Frederick Remington sent a telegram. We talked about the telegram, Morse code. He sends the telegram to William Randolph Hearst saying that, you know what, basically a war is not going to happen. There's not going to be a war. Basically, the rebels are not that organized. It's not going to happen. William Randolph Hearst sends a telegram back. The quote, "You furnish the pictures, and I'll furnish the war." This is a small example of his sensationalized practices, how he made it big and sensationalized, how his exaggerated practices. He pretty much said, hey, you give me the pictures, I'll furnish the war. What does that mean?
He could draw the pictures and he'll describe it.
Yep, he'll make the stories, he'll make it big, just give me some pictures, I'll make sure a war happens. All right, so this basically leads to Americans, you got to remember this time, there's no internet, there's no TV, radio doesn't, no. So pretty much almost all Americans are getting their news from these newspapers. That's where most of it's coming from. So America, hatred, anger is building for the Spanish at this time. We're going to keep on going here. All right. Could we post this whole video on YouTube?
Yeah, I think there's like 43 minutes.
43 minutes? Okay, so I think we're good so far.
Yeah, it's like 10 already, or less.
Yeah, okay. The Delome letter. I'm assuming it's Delome, not Delome, because he's from Spain. If I'm wrong about that, I'll fix it. The Delome letter. Okay. The Delome letter. This is something that further enrages, further angers Americans at Spain. Now, what is this letter actually about? Well, it's written by the Spanish ambassador to the United States, Enrique Dubois de Lome. Probably butchering that name. I'll make sure I say it right at some point. Now, he criticizes the American president at this time, William McKinley. He criticizes William McKinley. Now, this was a letter he wrote to a friend. This wasn't like an official government document. It was a personal letter. You can see it is just that's the actual copy of the letter, what it looks like, but in Spanish.
My handwriting's better than that.
Yeah, I can't read it either. So, now, what he basically calls William McKinley, he calls him weak, and says he's only concerned about gaining the favor of the crowd. That's his only big concern. So the letter's published, and it helps generate more support. It helps generate more support for the war with Cuba, the Spanish colony of Cuba. Sorry, with Spain, because it's about, Cuba. My mistake there. So it helps generate war with Spain. Now, it's published on February 9th, 1898 in the New York Journal. New York Journal is owned by, again, William Randolph Hearst, a yellow journalism newspaper. Now, his remarks about McKinley helped fuel the war. 2 months later, the United States actually goes to war. There's one more big spark here we're going to talk about. But I actually have a quote here from the letter, what he actually said. And we'll look at this and see, how bad is this quote? Is this a quote or a reason for war? This is on the PowerPoint if you can't see it in the video. So go look at the PowerPoint then. In the Delome letter it says, it once more shows what McKinley is. Weak and a bidder for the admiration of the crowd. Besides being a would-be politician, Politicastro, who tries to leave a door open behind himself while keeping on good terms with the Ginigos of his party. Ginigos, if you don't know what this term is, fairly close to fanatics or people who are just really extreme in their beliefs. So what he's basically saying here about McKinley is that, okay, this guy's a wannabe politician. He just wants to please people. He's not actually going to do anything. He's just going to, talk but not really do much. He's a weak guy. Is this a reason to go to war? Not really, but he shouldn't have said it. It's mean, but I don't know if it's a reason to go to war. So William Randolph Hearst gets this. Well, what's he going to do with this?
Reply.
First of all, he publishes it. After he publishes it, he makes stories basically saying things like, how dare the Spanish say this about our president? They think we're weak. They think we're not strong enough. And look at what they're doing to Cuba, all these horrible things, exaggerating the stories. This makes Americans more and more want to go to war. Basically think this is like a big barrel of gas at this point. And now we're just waiting for a match to make it blow up. And here's our match. Okay, the Maine. The USS Maine sinks right off Cuba. Actually, it blows up. February 15th, 1898. The Maine blows up off the shore of Cuba. Now, why did it blow up? We don't know. To this day, we still don't have proof of why the Maine blew up. Was it because someone attacked it? We don't know. It's not that. The Navy actually did an investigation after it blew up. In March, the Navy did an investigation. They spent, I believe it was $2 million on an investigation saying, why did the ship actually blow up? Their likely conclusion that there was a mine in the water that it blew up on is one reason. Like, mines are sometimes left in water, and they're bombs that can blow up. There's also been, like, people saying that it was pipes that made it blow up, but no one knows exactly why the main blew up. Like, a pipe exploded and that caused the ship to blow up, gas and such.
No survivors?
On the Maine, there was 266 of the 354 crew members died. So 266 of the 354 crew members do die on the Maine. Now, why was the ship there? Why was the ship right outside of Cuba? Well, there had been rioting on the streets of Havana. And again, the Cubans were very mad at the Spanish, at their government. There was rioting. And, you know, if you're serving, like if you're an American living in another country and there's like riots that go on, what might the American government do? They might want to get you out of there and back home. An example, I served in the Peace Corps in Turkmenistan for 2 years. I served after September 11th. I actually got there a year after, in September 2002. We were put on notice, all the time told that, you know what, if something bad happens, you have to get back to the capital, we'll put you on a plane if we have to. If we have to get you back to America, we get you back to America because you're American citizens. We need to protect you. Same thing back then, but there weren't like plane flights back then. So there was a Navy ship stationed outside of Cuba just in case the Americans who were doing business, the Americans who are working, you know, there's embassies, there's different people working with the government over there, just in case they had to leave to protect the American citizens. That's why it was there. And it blew up. Well, make an inference here, a prediction. How is William Randolph Hearst going to respond to that?
Who's gonna over-exaggerate the story and say that the Cubans probably like launched missiles or
The
something?
Cubans did it, or who owns Cuba?
Spain.
The Spanish, yeah. So William Randolph Hearst, if we look at the New York Journal, this is his newspaper about it, it says, destruction of the warship Maine was the work of an enemy. It doesn't say the Spanish did it. Destruction of the warship Maine was the work of an enemy. But what's he really inferring here that most people will read between the lines?
Spain.
That Spain did it.
Because they're like the main...
There would be like the
story.
enemy, the area of that time. After this, his articles get even more exaggerated, how they blew up the Maine, we need to go to war with them. And again, this happens in February 15th, and in April, the United States is going to war, is in the Spanish-American War. All right, so this turns American, and also if you look at here, one of the comics of this time, it shows the captains, the people blowing up, like it was the work of, the Spanish to get more sympathy and also to try to get people to fight in the war. So this leads our last part of the lecture today, and this is our shortest part, is the U.S. responds with war. Again, we see Cuba's right here, Florida's right here. The U.S. is right next to Cuba. Puerto Rico's right there, which will also become involved in another Spanish colony. And we'll talk about when the U.S. goes to Puerto Rico. And then also the Philippines get involved in this, which is the other Spanish colony. So the United States doesn't just go to war for Cuba, they also fight in Puerto Rico and Philippines for their independence and freedom. Then we'll talk about what actually happens after that. Does the United States actually fight for them and want them to have their independence in these areas? Theodore Roosevelt's going to become a big hero. He is a very brave man at this time, definitely. He leads the Rough Riders in a fight. Now, so we'll talk about his role actually more in our next unit, which we are reading about with American imperialism, what America does in these lands. And finally, down here we have Uncle Sam. This comic I kind of like a lot. It shows a lot what the opinion was of this area. Why do you think the water is just around his ankles?
I'm not sure.
Because Cuba's not even that far away. It's like a little bit of a walk, bringing the ships over, because America's going to go into Cuba, which isn't far away. So America actually has a big advantage in this war in a lot of ways against Spain, especially the Cuban part, especially the Cuba part in Puerto Rico, because they're very close to the U.S., very far from Spain. In addition, the Cubans and Americans are fighting together against the Spanish. It makes it very hard on Spain. It's kind of like when the French came and helped America during the Revolutionary War. All right, so that is our lecture. If you need the date, it's in April again, is when the war begins. And that is all. So how do we stop this thing? Just push it?
Yeah, the record thing.
Oh, right there.